Hello and welcome to today's community call. My name is Ugur. I suppose a lot of you know me by now. I'm part of the marketing team and I will be moderating today's call. Today I have with me Mark from operations, who has been on a couple of calls, and Dave from our BD team that leads the platform and dApp side. And yeah, since you know those guys already, I'm going to introduce the last person who was not on the call yet, which is Cameron. He leads our integrations team. And Cameron, feel free to say a little bit about what you do and how long you have been working for API3 and so on.
Yeah, so I'm Cameron. I started with API3 in around January. I was on BD doing reach out, trying to get API providers on board. Sit in the tech because I have a development background, mostly working with AWS with cloud. And I saw a perfect fit and transitioned into doing the integrations. And since the beginning of this month, I've been pushing the getting providers integrated with Airnode. So that's my role around here.
Cool. Thanks for the slight intro. Like we mentioned, we brought Cam into this to have a little bit of insight into the integration side. So if you have any questions throughout the evening that you want to ask Cameron in regards to integrations, just feel free to shoot any message into the comment section, either on YouTube or on Twitter, and we'll be going over that. We have a bunch of questions that you guys pre-submitted, so we'll first of all be going over those. And if you have any questions throughout this session, feel free to drop any type of questions into this. We recently announced our API3 Alliance, which sums up our BD work of the last, I want to say, 8 to 9 months in regards to API providers, data providers. I know that we haven't actively spoken about a lot of them until this point because a lot of NDA stuff that was going on, and we now came out with it. Yeah, that's I think the news speak for itself. There is not that much more to say about it. So if you have any questions in regard to the Alliance, just feel free to ask us. And I guess with all of that being said, I'm just going to jump into the questions that you asked us. And if you have any more, feel free to ask. First one, optimistic or ZK rollups, any plans on integrating either one? And Dave, you wanted to answer this one?
Yeah, I can take this. So obviously with optimistic rollups, there's a slightly different virtual machine, which means the way that smart contracts are computed compared to native Ethereum. It's the optimistic virtual machine instead of the Ethereum virtual machine. We have tested Airnode with an OVM rollup, and we know that Airnode works. So there are plans to integrate with these going forwards, and there should be more information about that in the future. Most ZK rollups use a different way of computing the code. So it may be a little bit more work with most ZK rollups, but we're looking at ones that are potentially using the EVM as well. So yeah, our plans for those are in the works. We are also have an integration on Arbitrum, which we're looking at getting more information out around.
Perfect. Thanks for covering that one. Next question. Can dApps decide to use API providers' data feeds and not subscribe to API3 insurance? Anybody that wants to take it, or otherwise I can? Okay, I'll take it. So the plan right now, I mean, if we're talking single Airnodes, you can, so to speak, subscribe to them without having to buy insurance. And as far as the plan is right now, actually access and insurance will be separate modules that can be combined. So you can technically gain access to a DAPI without buying insurance for the product. But yeah, I don't want to say it is set in stone. This might change or might not change since it's not out yet. And it's a product and work in progress.
Yeah,
All right.
I kind of wanted to elaborate on that and say that I think in most cases, although there will be separate products, kind of dApps or the APIs and insurance, it would maybe make sense that some people wouldn't want the insurance if they thought it would get them access to the data feed more cheaply. And others, even if they take the insurance, might not have the full value that's secured insured, which would effectively be partly having some of it uninsured anyway. But yeah, what Ugo said is pretty valid. It's still a product that's being designed and finalized. So there are caveats with that.
Great. Then I am pretty much going to jump to the next one. Are you done now that you have over 125 partners?
I'll take that one. Are we done at 125? No, definitely not. Of course not. In terms of data feeds, it's just a question of integrating, whatever the customer delivers via APIs onto the actual product, and considering the product runs through, an AWS or whatever other hosted cloud mechanism the customer chooses to use. It's just a question of integrating them. There is no scale limit, really. So why not keep going? As many as we can. Because the more data feeds we can provide, in terms of the entire space, the better it will be. The more projects we can build, the more services can be provisioned and realized and maybe monetized as well. So no, we're definitely not stopping at 125.
I would just make the distinction between data feeds and APIs being available. So this is APIs being made available. Data feed is a kind of consistently updated reference point, which is another product that we'll make out of those. But we also do aim to have as many data feeds as possible and economical available.
If you followed our governance proposals and our forum, you also saw that the BD API team put out another proposal. So there's actually a team that is still going at it and signing more. And I guess we'll just go to all of the Alliance questions that are tied into this. I'll just take this one. Are you going to tweet each new Alliance member from now on? How will the community know if we have new partners? Go ahead, guys.
I'll take it if you want. In terms of tweeting every single one, as the business scales and as more partners are added, obviously, so that's something that's under constant review in terms of marketing, in terms of the most efficient way of actually working with our partners and letting people know what partnerships and have arrived. So that is the current policy for the foreseeable future. As far as I know, that will continue, but it will be subject to constant review because it's a growing business and the partnerships do grow as well.
Okay, just because you had like a slight, the connection was slightly cutting off in between. So what Mark basically meant that the marketing team is always like reviewing this, and it's going to be, so to speak, a marketing decision if it's going to be a single announcement or if we're going to announce them in batches and so on. So keep tuned and you'll know what we have decided how to make you guys aware of how it's going, but we're definitely going to make you aware of how this is progressing. And let's jump to Cameron. How many Alliance members run Airnode already?
Yeah, so I've been at this since the beginning of the month. It's the 19th now. We have 18 providers that are running Airnodes. So those providers are already providing data on chain and are ready to go. We also, the way the integration works is we prepare the deployment package, we prepare the integration, then we reach out to the provider and they deploy the Airnode in 10 minutes. So as far as deployment packages and integrations go, we have 38 of those done and ready for the provider's deployment. So it'll be a pretty active rest of the month, and things are going exactly according to plan.
Yeah, maybe also to point out, like, I guess the next question that also ties pretty much into that. how hard is it to do this? Since you said like we have 18 running and like 36, 38 basically waiting for deployment.
Yeah, so the actual integration process, depending if you have an actual Swagger doc or an Open API spec, which is a mapping for your API, that we can get your deployment package, your integration done within an hour, and we can have it ready. The actual deployment, which is really just putting your credentials into the deployment script and running that. That deployment script usually takes about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes if you have a slow connection, and that's it. You're done. And if you want to make any changes, you make those changes in the deployment package, and you can redeploy in the same amount of time, 5-10 minutes.
Cool, perfect. Did we have? Yeah, here was another one. I mean, when can we expect the partners live? It's going to be a growing list. I mean, we pretty much said that already, that we're not done at 125. It's going to keep going. And Cam kind of went over how fast and how many are ready and so on. So it's going to be an ongoing thing.
Some clarification: we're on pace to do around 30 integrations per month. So if that answers your question, I hope so.
Yeah, should cover it, I guess.
I guess one more. The question might mean, when can we expect the people who are using the data live using the data?
Oh, that could also be interpreted like that.
Yeah. So I guess I should mention that we currently have people who are kind of ready to use this data in a production use case. We are with Airnode. We're having some extra work done to it to convert it to a beta version that's more suited for production use, and that should be ready within the next month or two, roughly. But people can use the pre-alpha version already, but we're suggesting for the time being they wait for the beta version, and we have users ready to use this as soon as it's done. So yeah, hopefully we should see the first use cases out soon.
Great. Just checking if we have any more. Yeah, we do actually. I want to use some of your data on Polygon. When will this be possible? I guess you kind of answered that with your, yeah. I mean, technically, and Dave also said this, Airnode pre-alpha allows this. So it is technically possible. We just don't advise for it until the Dave mentioned beta is out.
Yeah, and Polygon is one of the first networks that we're planning on launching a use case on as well. So it should be really soon. But technically, any of the networks will be supported. So if you've not spoken to me yet, then feel free to reach out, and I can give you more details and show you exactly how it will work.
All right. I think we only have one more left. And that is this one that was also asked in our Discord. And I saved this one for the last because it's a little more elaborate, and I actually had to make a presentation for it, since a lot of the stuff is, like we mentioned in the beginning, work in progress and also hasn't been documented yet. So what I'm going to give you right now is like a slide presentation of how Airnode works and how the monetization works behind it. And yeah. If you have questions, it's going to be a little more technical. So if you have questions, feel free to jump into our Discord, jump into our Telegram, and just ask us again to elaborate on the certain aspects that you did not understand. So for this example, I'm going to be using Finish, which is one of our providers in the API3 Alliance that we announced. Finish, as far as I know, Cameron, is already integrated, so they are running in Airnode. How it works with Airnode is that a potential customer needs to be whitelisted on the Airnode in order to be able to make calls. And that is done through so-called authorizers. There is the API3 authorizer, which is an authorizer that the DAO controls. And then there is a self-authorizer, which is an authorizer that the provider controls. So authorizers, like I mentioned, a whitelist an address indefinitely or for a specified amount of time. One thing to note here is also that only because the API that the DAO, the API3 DAO controls the API3 authorizer does not mean that we have full control over the Airnode of the provider. The provider can, of course, always deny access. They are in full control over their data. I'm going to be explaining the API3 authorizer first before I go into the self-authorizer and explain that part. So if there is a potential customer, or let's maybe start at the beginning. Finish is running an Airnode. Like I mentioned, the API3 authorizer is whitelisting potential customers. So it is in control over the Airnode whitelisting. And the API3 DAO controls that specific authorizer. So if there's a specific customer that wants access to the feed, they would actually request it from the DAO. And then the DAO would technically have to vote on whitelisting that customer. Now, obviously, that is a way that is not very scalable, because imagine now we have 100 customers that want access through onto that Airnode, and it would be 100 separate votes to whitelist them. Like nobody, like people are going to be very annoyed that they have to vote about this. But that is not the way how we envisioned it anyway. You can give away control of, so to speak, the authorizer. So the DAO can technically give away control to a multi-sig, to a wallet, or even a contract that then uses the API3 authorizer to whitelist addresses. And now the good part here is that this, for instance, contract could be set up in a way where you would need to require API3 to be whitelisted for 1 day, like one API3 to be whitelisted for 1 day that is programmed into the contract. So now a customer could technically, for instance, engage with the contract and log 100 API3, and the contract would then whitelist that address for 100 days. So this now allows us to completely automate it, or also give away the whitelisting process to the contract that then does it based on the customer engagement. Important here to note is that in this setup, the provider is actually not paid by the customer. The customer engages with the contract and then, so to speak, with the DAO. So there would have to be an arrangement between the DAO and the potential provider to pay them out X amount of money on the basis of how many users request access. And this could be done either through fiat or cryptocurrencies, however the provider wants their money for it. I hope that covers the API3 authorizer. If there are any questions, feel free to drop them. Obviously, the provider doesn't need to go through the API3 DAO. One part I forgot, ChainAPI. ChainAPI, which is going to be our marketplace for people that don't know, is pretty much going to be the UI for that contract interface. So you will be able to select an Airnode, lock up X amount of API3, and in the background interact with the contract that then whitelists you for X amount of time. So coming to the self-authorizer part, that controls also the Airnode, and the self-authorizer is controlled by the API provider. So the API provider could manually whitelist whichever address they want, which allows them, if the potential customer approaches them and pays the provider, this can be off-chain through a wire transfer or on-chain with whatever payment, and then the API provider can, in return, whitelist that potential customer, which gives them full control over adding additional customers if they want to. Another opportunity is, of course, that similar how the DAO sets up a contract to automate this, that the provider actually gives this control away to a smart contract that requires a payment and does this in an automated way. Now, the interesting part here is actually that the provider is in full control over which payment they want to have for this. The DAO obviously will go for API3, so API3 has to be locked to gain access, but the provider could technically choose to go with Uni or Sushi and automate it in that fashion. And maybe a more elaborate example would be, for instance, we also have FTX, and you know that there's the FTT token. So FTX could make access to their Airnode through their self-authorizer dependent on a payment of FTT. And I hope that covers everything. If there are questions, feel free to ask. I know it's a lot, and we'll probably have to go over this multiple more times. And maybe one last thing, all of this is like very, currently being worked on, and there's a GitHub issue to document all of this. So in the next couple of weeks, there will actually be documentation that you can just scroll through and read. So this is, pretty much the newest information we can give you that is not even documented yet. Yeah, and I guess I'll go back here. This covers all of the pre-submitted questions. So if you have any questions, now's the time to ask us anything that you want to know. We're going to be covering all types of questions that you might have, except for exchange talk and price talk, as always. So we already have some questions. We're just going to be going over them. Feel free to drop us more. First one. Could you elaborate a bit what in the Airnode is already working and which aspects should be worked up, in your opinion, before a stable version can be launched? Same for insurance. There was a correction afterwards. Is this something you guys want to take?
I could take that first part at least. Yeah, so the pre-alpha version of Airnode is, I would say, really stable. It's definitely usable. If you wanted to experiment with Airnode, you can go find the Airnode starter. That's on our GitHub. It's also in the documentation. That runs you through, deploying an Airnode if you were to be a provider. And it also takes you through the role of the requester and actually using a provider's Airnode. And all that stuff is very stable. The stuff that's coming, in the next versions where it'll be production ready would be more focused around the authorizers functions. There's some stuff that'll help save on costs. You won't have to do as many transactions. There's some that we can actually cut out through logic. So that type of stuff will be improved in the next version. But if you were interested in running Airnode, using Airnode, you can start doing that right away.
Is there, you want to cover, anybody want to cover the insurance part?
Yeah, I can touch on some of the insurance. Not much of this is kind of public yet, exactly what's being worked on. But there are, we're kind of planning for the long term by putting together plans to create a viable insurance product, but also looking at something more short term that could be brought in around the time, or around or shortly after the time the first use case is alive. And I think there'll be more about those especially when the first kind of product has been fleshed out in more detail, then I think there'll be an article about it. But I can't really go into any more depth because nothing's finalized yet.
I hope that covers it. If it doesn't, feel free to drop us another question. I think the next one goes to you, Dave.
Yeah, so as far as I know, Hedge Against Inflation are going to be airdropping a percentage of their tokens to API3 stakers on the 22nd. This is based on them wanting to decentralize the kind of ownership in the product or in their project. And one of the ways they're doing this is by giving it to API3 stakers who are also going to be responsible for providing data to hedge against inflation. So if you want more information about it, other than that, I'd suggest joining their channels and asking. They're normally pretty good at answering questions. The airdrop will be on Polygon is the only other relevant thing. So, but that won't be at a different address to your original Ethereum address. But yeah, like I say, any questions are best directed towards their channels.
The next one goes also into that and what it means for holders. Maybe we can go into that, or
I would say what it means for holders. I can't mention anything price-wise, but it means that there's another project you should take a look into, and if you want to help get involved in governing that, then you can. And High Damo is hedge. Sorry, I say Hedge Against Inflation. They've rebranded as High Damo.
Yeah, we actually don't have a lot, not a lot more, we don't have any more questions. So if you have any, feel free to ask us. Other than that, I guess what is another thing we could be talking about? Any suggestions here? Otherwise, I can also talk about our forum. We have had some proposals there and some suggestions, and yeah, we slightly touched upon this with Eric in our last community call. You can, so to speak, go onto our forum, and if you have an idea that you want funding for, we highlighted, for instance, the community build dashboard that allows to look into the API3 DAO and the people that are, staking, how they're voting, how each vote goes, who voted, and so on. And our core technical team actually made a payment to that DAO dashboard creator because that individual solved a lot of requests that have been made to us. So if there is something you want to build out, some community initiative, maybe some marketing strategy, some business development effort, like anything, you can make a proposal and convince people that your idea is good, convince people of why you will be able to accomplish the idea you just put out, and then receive funds for doing that. In the same fashion, actually, if you want to be the sub-DAO that deploys actually on other chains, you can already approach us and ask for a grant to build out the contracts, for instance, for a Rust version, a Substrate version of Airnode, and ask for funds. Maybe Dave also has something to say on that. Okay. Maybe I'll take the marketing question since it's asked. What is your marketing strategy moving forward? So I think we covered this a lot in some community calls. A lot of people, when it comes to marketing, always think there is only the crypto side of marketing. But being, so to speak, in the intersection of everything, we have to talk to businesses, we have to talk to enterprises, and we have to talk to potential customers that are crypto native. Our marketing efforts are actually going into 3 different directions instead of just one. So we have campaigns and initiatives to actually talk to API providers. I think Mason gave a presentation at API Days, which is one of the biggest global API provider events there is, and gave a presentation, introduced Airnode and how API providers can monetize. We have been part of EthCC, and actually that was more crypto native, I want to say, and platform native, talked to a bunch of projects, talked to a bunch of blockchains, and had, so to speak, marketing efforts there. And it's, I want to say, going to continue that in that direction. We also have some community stuff prepared that is currently in the works, also educational material to bring, to educate people on how oracles work and so on. And a lot of the stuff will be coming within the next week. I mean, you saw a lot of the stuff we talked about in the marketing proposal that Ryan put out and mentioned what we're going to be talking about. Dave, you want to take the one from Midav?
What's Midhouse's one? Can I talk about the first sub-DAO related proposal? I think the one from Ferdy is probably more relevant given what you mentioned earlier, Ugo. Is ChainAPI, what's the role of ChainAPI in the locked token scenario? Just as access list, whitelist, or is there a financial aspect to it, like asset management or the burning of tokens as fees for any provided services? I think initially we're looking at locking tokens, but the talk is after that of progressing to a burning model, rather than having tokens just locked up for people to access it. I think the locking is early on to give people the ability to access the APIs, test everything, make sure everything works, and get used to using it, rather than having to have a direct financial outlay for that, sort of like a kind of freemium model with traditional APIs.
Yeah. So, like Dave mentioned, we're in the beginning, it's going to be a locking mechanism just to incentivize the usage. So we're trying to attract like attract people to it, to use it. So you will need, if you go over the DAO provided service API3, so if you go over the API3 authorizer, you will need API3 to access it, which will in the beginning be a log, and then gradually can be turned into a burn. So you would burn, for instance, after a while 25%, and then 50%, and then 100%, and so on. So in the beginning, incentivizing usage, you get the tokens back, and then gradually will burn more. And I'll just continue with the ChainAPI one. It is not mandatory. You can do it on a contract level. Or is there something else you want to say to that, Dave?
No, that's kind of my understanding as well.
Okay. Yeah, so just to elaborate on that, it's just going to be the UI that will make it easier for people to interact with it from the data requester side. But for the providers, it's going to also have different features that actually make it easier. For instance, Cameron, I think, does a lot of the integrations currently with his own built tool that automates a lot of the things. But the future of everything is basically that a provider can do all of this without interacting with us. So they go to ChainAPI, they put in their open API specifications, which automatically translates it into the Oracle integration specifications. They get all of the necessary files directly on ChainAPI, deploy, manage their Airnode directly over ChainAPI without actually ever interacting with API3 in any way if they don't want to. It should be possible to do this in a completely automated way because we have limited resources, and considering how many potential API providers are out there, and also, like Cameron mentioned, he currently can do like about 30 integrations per month. And considering that the pipeline will be growing and growing and growing, we need to automate this or make it like conceptualize it in a way that people can do this on their own. All right, I think that covers it. Next one. I'm not sure.
I can say something to that. So,
yeah.
So like we said, a lot of that authorizers information is brand new and hasn't been documented yet. But I do know that providers, their main concern, or their most prevalent concern, is around authorization and controlling users and monetization. And so we have plenty of options for solutions, and we definitely have it as a priority on the development team. They're fully aware of, how big of a deal this is. And so I think in the next iterations of Airnode, we'll see a lot more UX improvements on this type of stuff.
Maybe also to just go into that, using the self-authorizer technically also means that you're doing transactions, or you're making transactions. Like whitelisting somebody is a transaction. So if the provider does not want to transact in any way on the blockchain, then the way over the API3 DAO would be the most likely the preferred way, because once we set up, so to speak, that's the smart contract that automates everything, the data requester actually covers all transaction costs, and we pay out the provider based on the deal that we have with them, like the DAO has with them. Like technically, a provider could also ask somebody to set up that automation for them, and then they would never touch crypto, and actually, but then they would be paid in crypto. Yeah, I think most of them will probably opt to go with the API3 version, but there's of course always the option of them doing it themselves. Like somebody like, I want to say Finnish, who also runs a Chainlink node and stuff, they will most likely not have a problem with being paid in crypto or doing this themselves, since they have access to it. Why has the total supply increased by 1.7 million tokens, according to CoinGecko? So I think we covered a lot of this. Like rewards at API in the API3 DAO are inflationary. So if you are staking, you are receiving inflationary rewards that are minted currently at the end of are mintable after the epoch has passed, which is Thursday 0 UTC, if I'm not mistaken, guys. So basically new tokens are created and people that are staking are rewarded with them. And I think that should cover it. Mark, do you want to take the one with the separation between compare to link?
Yeah, I can do. How do you separate yourself? I think people are conflating, if you think of it metaphorically, an apple with an orange. We don't really do the same things. Link is heavily focused, even though, in terms of business focus, it does other things too. We are a general API delivery platform, not just pricer, etc. We're more heavily focused on bringing as many different types of data onto the on-chain space as possible. So there is a difference of business and project focus. In terms of, yeah, that's basically it. And also the nature of the actual service that we provide, there is a differentiation between how our Airnode product works and how the Link product works, both functionally and in terms of the code base. So, but to actually get into the, into the woods with that right now is quite a detailed discussion between first and third party oracles. So we'd probably leave that for another call, but that's all in the documentation on the blogs anyway. But yeah, we do try and separate because it's not really a fair comparison. But there's always going to be that because that's the nature of the space and that's the nature of people, conflating and putting things in boxes. It's a human nature kind of thing when two things sit in the same kind of sector within a business.
Great.
What you can do is try to separate yourself. Whether you're going to succeed or not is an ongoing thing. Yeah.
Gonna continue with Ferdy's questions. What's the expectation for average count of integrations in the future? To what grade will ChainAPI ease speed up the already quick integrations, leading to a higher average 60 integrations per month, 200, 400? Yeah.
Yeah, so 30 integrations a month is definitely a conservative estimate. And the beginning of the cycle, we're focusing a lot on preparing to scale. So we're building out a lot of training documentation, bringing in members to help with. We have an integration engineer that just works on integrations all day long. Then we have a deployment engineer. We have a communication manager. So we're really building out the team to anticipate this influx of providers and integrations. So I expect that number to increase, especially with, like you mentioned, ChainAPI coming. That should exponentially increase the integration rate. That should make things, if a provider can go from 0 to integrated without needing to contact our communication guy, without the integration engineer, that would dramatically speed things up.
Yeah, just to highlight it again, I think, Cameron, you mentioned that 38 are basically ready and waiting to be integrated. And if they can do that by themselves with ChainAPI, the number currently wouldn't be at 18, it would be at 56. So
Exactly.
basically, ChainAPI is just gonna remove us as the bottleneck, and that is the overall goal.
Yeah. And I should mention, integration is easy enough where we've had a handful of providers actually integrate Airnode themselves and deploy themselves without any without getting on a meeting with us. So I think if once ChainAPI comes out, I think that's going to be maybe even the more popular option.
Gonna continue with Ferdy. Isn't Link more focused on off-chain features and API3 is on-chain 100%? I mean, I guess how to put, we're more focused on actually making APIs blockchain accessible. Like that is the summary of it. So if there's a service that can be used as an API service, we can make it so you can use it over the blockchain. May it be sending an email, receiving two-factor authentication, accessing your bank account, getting the weather, looking for the next flight, whatever it is that basically an API allows you to do, we allow you to do that over the blockchain, whatever the use case may be. And Link also, I want to say, does, like you mentioned, also off-chain computation and all sorts of those things. And we are solely focused on, at least right now, I don't want to like nail this in because it's a DAO. It could be that Airnode is built out to do whatever, but our current focus, or from the teams that have put proposals forward, the current focus of the project is making API services available on chain in a trust minimized way. Okay. Anything you guys want to take, or should I just? When will it come out? Michael, if you could maybe, when ChainAPI. I think we had Andre on here 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago. I don't want to, yeah.
It's a big focus for the development team. I know that. We wouldn't want to lock in any dates or anything like that, but it's definitely a big focus. They're polishing off what they need to. Yeah,
it's being developed is all I want to say. I definitely don't want to give out dates dates and projects. People have expectations and we don't want to go down that road. So it's being built and we're going to announce once it's ready. And I think there's a lot of questions around that. So what are the actual use cases for the API3 token? Somebody wants to go?
Well, that's easy enough. It's governance, basically.
But it'll also then be usable for people locking it and then eventually burning it to access single APIs. And also it'll be burning it to access the APIs or data feeds when they're live. So they're the main use cases.
Great. Any more questions? Otherwise, I'm slowly gonna call it quits for today if there's nothing more that we have to cover. I'll give them like 10 more seconds to ask. Otherwise, I'm going to be turning off for today. Yeah, calling it quits. So thank you guys for listening in today. Thanks, Dave and Mark, as always, to join and answer questions. And I also want to thank Cameron for his first time joining here. You're more than welcome to join more often. And yeah, see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.
Have a nice evening.
See you later.